Today we have a new gouache painting video where we're painting this cherry blossom branch on this textured and overall a little bit messy style. Before we get started though, I want to show you this new sketchbook I'm using that was kindly sent to me by Etchr's lab. This is not sponsored or anything, I just really wanted to use it and show you how beautiful this journal is. It's their more expensive sketchbook with thicker 300 GSM watercolor paper, and it has this beautiful brown cover, and the sides of the pages have this natural ribbed look, which gives such a dreamy, luxurious touch in my opinion. They also sent me some painting brushes that we're gonna use today, and this other journal that actually is the same one as my old sketchbook that I've been using for a while, which is a little bit cheaper and suits perfectly for everyday painting in my opinion. But anyway, I opened up this journal from the first empty spread and tried not to feel pressured about that. I don't know about you guys, but I'm always so nervous to start a new sketchbook and especially mess the first page. In fact, I used to draw a stick figure on the very first page of my sketchbook to get rid of that perfectionist fear. So feel free to do whatever you want with that information, but today we'll just go for it. I outlined the page with some washi tape and then took out some colors for the background. All the colors and tools I'm using are listed in the description, and I'll also do my best to write them on the screen while I'm using them. I had sketched out the main outline for the flower branch beforehand, which honestly won't help us much, and it's also why I didn't include it in the video. Gouache paints tend to cover your sketches unless you're really careful to go around them, which is why I usually don't bother or just go with some very rough guidelines. So this time we're starting by painting the background, which is often easier since we're able to add everything else on top. My goal with the background was to create lots of texture and a heavy contrast with the lights and shadows. I wanted the top corner to have this very bright area and then the opposite bottom corner to have the most darkness. That will help us achieve this high contrast, almost glowing light appearance in the picture. So I started to tap different colors here using this fairly large round brush, starting from these lighter yellows that will cover all the lightest spots in the background. And then I slowly started to add some darker shades and blend these areas together. The background will look like a hot mess for a while. Gouache paints don't really melt together the same way watercolors do, even if you add more water to achieve a lighter finish. So you'll kind of need to go over the same areas multiple times to just slowly blur the lines together. I like to do this by cleaning most of the paint from my brush and smoothing the transition areas with a pretty clean and dry brush. I found that works the best to create a smoother finish and almost this oil painting effect. I also added a bunch of different colors here in hopes of making the background a little bit more lively. I mostly used 2 different shades of brown and even this dark Prussian blue shade and then some green as well. I tried to avoid using black for the background this time just to see what would happen and if I could achieve a dark enough color just by mixing the other shades together. One thing I would do differently is that I also wouldn't have used white paint on the background. I tried to lighten up some of the darker spots. You'll see it especially on the right side next to the flower branch. So I tried to add some white there and it kind of ended up muddying the colors and adding this weird gray area. I did fix it a little bit later, so it's not the end of the world. But it was definitely better to create the light spots by just leaving enough areas where you don't add the dark colors. This background step took a while and I was kind of leaving some of these flower and leaf areas white. I think this wasn't necessary for the flowers especially. You'll see that I'll struggle with this decision later while painting the flowers because the background around them wasn't dark and defined enough to bring out the flower details. But I did feel like some of the lighter leaves looked nicer this way. There's always a small texture difference when you have to add a very opaque layer of paint versus only adding a light, almost watercolor style color layer on a white background. So I think the leaves definitely look nicer with the latter style. And whenever you want to paint on top of a dark background, you definitely need that opaque color layer, which just takes a little bit away from this translucent textured color. But then we will enter the phase that caused me the most headache with this painting, which was basically figuring out how to move on from here. In general, I really hesitate to call this video a tutorial because I honestly had no idea what I was doing either. I kind of posted this on my Instagram and asked you guys if you wanted to still see a video about this, and many of you said yes, so that's why I decided to edit this video anyway. So I think this is more of a paint with me or let's try to figure this out together type of video, but I'll definitely share everything I learned and what I would do differently. I also tried to keep this video a little bit slower and add some relaxing music to the background as always, so if you want to speed things up, feel free to watch this on a double speed, for example. So one problem that occurs when the background has this many different tones is that we need to find colors for the leaves and flowers that still stand out against all these colors in the background. So this is where I finally took out my black paint to basically create a darker color than anything we have in the background and use that for the darkest shadowy leaves and the flower branch. I think adding a few of these very dark leaves helps to create contrast and also just frame all the lighter shapes in a way. Then I also wanted to add some lighter leaves, and my goal was to leave this bright sunlit effect on some of them. I quite liked how this orange shade looked like, so I used that a lot on the top leaves, and then added this very bright yellowy green shade here as well. I thought that using shades with lots of yellow would maybe help to add that bright light effect. But then after adding some of these dark shades and the first leaves, it was time to start working on the flowers, and I very quickly figured that I needed to define the flower shapes a lot more. I didn't do a good enough job just leaving the white areas while painting the background, so all of this was looking pretty messy at this stage. So I added some fresh white paint on my palette and started by defining the main shapes of the flowers. I think the white worked as a good background color for the flowers because it was easy to add some other colors on top of it to create some shadows and define the shapes in general. However, you kind of need some dark color in the center of the flowers and kind of in between the different petals to really bring out the flower shapes. So this would have been easier if I had a little bit more even background color behind the flower areas. I ended up adding a few extra flowers here and there by just painting them on top of the dark background with the white paint, and I felt like it was so much easier than trying to define these uneven white blobs and adding darker colors in between them. But anyway, this again was a step that took me a long time. I'm not gonna lie, I almost gave up multiple times during this painting process because it wasn't very satisfying and I felt like nothing was looking like I wanted, but I'm happy I eventually decided to just keep trying and keep defining the flower shapes. It's kind of amazing looking at this footage afterwards, how these flowers are slowly taking shape out of nothingness. I feel like that really is the most magical thing about painting in general. But anyway, at some point I decided to remove the washi tape borders because I felt like I needed the clean white border around the painting to judge it better. Then something I found really helpful while painting the flowers was adding these red and blue colors to create variation and shadows. The red color helps to bring out the center parts of the flower, and by smudging that along the petals a little bit, I feel like it created a very natural color to them. Then the blue color is a great shadow color because I think it's quite different from the other warmer shades in this painting. So I feel like this cool toned blue helped the flowers stand out. I think if I had used black or maybe brown instead, the shapes would have disappeared more to the background, and you also wouldn't get the interesting color contrast between the blue and red in the flowers. So yeah, this was maybe not the most intuitive color choice, but I think it worked pretty well for this painting. But then we're entering the final stages of this painting, which is just any final polishing here and there. I made some edits to the background, as I mentioned earlier, because I didn't like the gray blob on the right side, so I tried to add some brown to this area to cover the muddiness a little bit, but then pretty much the rest of the painting was just adding small fixes to the flowers and leaves. I still felt like the flowers didn't look very defined and the background around them somehow made everything messy, so I tried to fix that by outlining the flowers ever so slightly with a darker color. I think this definitely helped to sharpen the shapes, and it also helped to differentiate the flower from each other. I also darkened the center parts even more and then added some pure white strokes here and there, especially on some of these leaves. So my goal was to have these very glowy parts in the branch that look like it's being hit by the sunlight. And I don't know if I exactly achieved that, but the idea is definitely there. Creating interesting lights in my paintings is something I definitely want to improve moving forward. It's extremely hard in my opinion, but really elevates the paintings. And whenever I see a painting where the light is very interesting, it makes it look like the artist really knows what they are doing. So yeah, that's one of my own art goals at the moment. But anyway, some of the other last things I added here were some white dots here and there, some background fixes, and any small final edits to the flowers. after all that, we're finally done with this whole painting, and even if it wasn't the most straightforward tutorial, I hope you found this helpful and enjoyed following along. If this was your first time around here and you'd like to stay tuned for more, definitely consider subscribing, and you can also check out my shop and Patreon for all the other stuff I do. But that's all for this time. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having an amazing day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye!